The security camera footage from 4782 Maple Street shows Gerald Hoffman watering his front lawn at exactly 6:15 a.m. on August 23rd, 2024. What the camera doesn't capture is the high-powered telescope hidden in his upstairs bedroom window, pointed directly at the Henderson family's kitchen table where they ate breakfast every morning. Hoffman had been watching the Hendersons for 3 years, documenting their every move in detailed journals that filled 17 notebooks. By 7:30 a.m. that same morning, Sarah Henderson would be dead, her husband Mark critically injured, and their 2 children traumatized witnesses to a brutal attack that began with a neighborly knock on the door. The weapon Hoffman used was a baseball bat he had stolen from the Hendersons' garage 6 months earlier, taking it during one of his regular, unauthorized visits to their property. Hoffman's obsession with the Henderson family had consumed his life completely. His basement contained over 3,000 photographs of family members taken through telephoto lenses, floor plans of their house, drawn with architectural precision, and a shrine-like display of items he had stolen from their garbage over the years. He knew their schedules better than they did. What started as casual observation had evolved into something far more dangerous. Hoffman had been entering their home when they were away, memorizing the layout, trying on their clothes, and eating their food. He had installed hidden cameras in their living room and bedrooms, broadcasting their most private moments to his computer for his personal viewing. The attack on August 23rd was not random violence or a burglary gone wrong. It was the culmination of a 3-year psychological deterioration that had transformed a lonely neighbor into a deadly predator who believed the Henderson family belonged to him. Maple Street cut through the heart of Riverside, Ohio, a middle-class suburb where ranch-style homes sat on quarter-acre lots behind neatly trimmed hedges. The neighborhood had been developed in the 1980s and attracted young families drawn by good schools and safe streets. Most residents had lived there for over a decade and knew each other by name. Gerald Hoffman, 57, lived alone in the house at 4784 Maple Street after his mother's death in 2018. He worked night shifts at a medical supply warehouse and spent his days maintaining his property with obsessive precision. Neighbors described him as quiet and helpful, someone who kept to himself but was always willing to lend tools or help with yard work. The Henderson family had moved to 4782 Maple Street in 2021, purchasing the house next door to Hoffman for $285,000. Mark Henderson, 34, worked as an insurance adjuster, while his wife Sarah, 31, taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Their children, Emma and Lucas, were 8 and 6 years old respectively. The Hendersons appeared to be the ideal suburban family, active in community events and popular with neighbors. Sarah organized block parties and school fundraisers, while Mark coached Little League and maintained their yard to neighborhood standards. Their children were well-behaved and played regularly in the front yard. Hoffman's initial interactions with the Henderson family seemed normal and neighborly. He helped them move furniture when they first arrived, shared vegetables from his garden, and offered to collect their mail during vacations. However, his helpfulness gradually became intrusive, as he began showing up unannounced and asking personal questions about their daily routines. Gerald Hoffman woke at 5:30 a.m. on August 23, 2024, and immediately began his morning surveillance routine. He positioned himself at his bedroom window with binoculars and a telephoto camera, documenting the Henderson family's breakfast activities, as he had done every morning for over 2 years. His detailed logs showed he had missed only 12 days of observation during that period. At 7:15 a.m., Hoffman watched Mark Henderson leave for work, following his normal routine of backing out of the driveway and driving south on Maple Street. Sarah Henderson was in the kitchen preparing lunch boxes for the children, who were getting dressed upstairs. This was the moment Hoffman had been planning for during 3 weeks of careful preparation. Hoffman walked to his basement and retrieved the aluminum baseball bat he had taken from the Henderson garage during a previous break-in. He had wrapped the handle with black electrical tape to improve his grip and had practiced swinging the bat in his backyard for hours. The weapon showed signs of repeated use in preparation. At 7:28 a.m., Hoffman left his house through the back door and walked across the small gap between properties. He had cut a hole in the fence separating the yards months earlier, concealing it with a removable panel that allowed him easy access to the Henderson property. Security cameras later showed him crossing into their yard, carrying the baseball bat. Hoffman approached the Hendersons' front door and rang the doorbell at 7:31 a.m. Sarah Henderson answered the door while still wearing her bathrobe, expecting to see a delivery person or neighbor needing assistance. When she opened the door, Hoffman immediately pushed his way inside without speaking, carrying the baseball bat openly. The attack began in the front hallway, where Hoffman struck Sarah Henderson in the head with the baseball bat, causing her to fall backward onto the hardwood floor. The force of the blow fractured her skull and caused immediate unconsciousness. Blood spatter patterns found throughout the hallway indicated multiple strikes had been delivered after she had fallen. Emma and Lucas Henderson were eating breakfast in the kitchen when they heard their mother's screams. Both children ran toward the front of the house and witnessed Hoffman standing over their mother's body, holding the bloody baseball bat. The children's witness testimony would later provide crucial details about the attack and Hoffman's behavior. Hoffman chased both children through the house, pursuing them into the living room, where they attempted to hide behind furniture. He struck 8-year-old Emma once in the shoulder with the baseball bat, breaking her collarbone but allowing her to continue running. 6-year-old Lucas escaped injury by hiding under a dining room table. The children ran upstairs and locked themselves in their parents' bedroom, using Sarah Henderson's cell phone to call 911 at 7:34 a.m. The emergency dispatcher could hear Hoffman moving through the house below, apparently searching for the children while making loud noises by overturning furniture and breaking objects. Mark Henderson returned home at 7:41 a.m. After receiving a panicked call from his daughter, Emma. He found his front door standing open and his wife unconscious in the hallway. When he knelt down to check Sarah's condition, Hoffman emerged from the living room and struck him twice in the back with the baseball bat, causing spinal injuries that would leave him partially paralyzed. Riverside police arrived at 7:43 a.m. to find Hoffman still inside the Henderson home, sitting calmly in the living room, surrounded by family photographs he had been studying. He offered no resistance when officers arrested him and made no attempt to explain his actions. The baseball bat lay on the coffee table next to him, covered in blood and hair. Sarah Henderson was transported to Riverside General Hospital, where she died from her injuries at 9:17 a.m. without regaining consciousness. Mark Henderson underwent emergency surgery for spinal injuries, but survived the attack. Emma Henderson was treated for a broken collarbone and released the same day. The crime scene investigation revealed extensive evidence of Hoffman's long-term surveillance and stalking activities. Hidden cameras were found throughout the house, connected to wireless transmitters that sent signals to recording equipment in Hoffman's basement. The cameras had been recording the family's activities for over 18 months. Detective Lisa Morgan of the Riverside Police Department's Major Crimes Unit took charge of the Henderson murder investigation and immediately recognized the case as something far more complex than a simple assault. Hoffman's calm demeanor during arrest and his extensive knowledge of the Henderson family suggested a long-term stalking situation rather than a spontaneous attack. The detective's first major discovery came during the search of Hoffman's basement, which had been converted into a surveillance center focused entirely on monitoring the Henderson family. The room contained multiple computer monitors, recording equipment, and filing cabinets filled with detailed observations about the family's daily activities, personal habits, and private conversations. Morgan found that Hoffman had been systematically stealing mail from the Henderson family for over 2 years, intercepting bank statements, medical records, and personal correspondence. He had used this information to create detailed profiles of each family member, including their work schedules, medical conditions, financial status, and personal relationships. The investigation revealed that Hoffman had made duplicate keys to the Henderson home using impressions taken from keys he had temporarily borrowed during friendly visits. He had been entering their house regularly when they were away, sometimes spending hours inside photographing personal items, trying on their clothing, and eating their food. Detective Morgan discovered that Hoffman had installed motion sensors around the Henderson property that alerted him whenever family members came and went. His cell phone contained an app that tracked these sensors, allowing him to monitor their movements in real time. He knew their exact location at all times, even when they were inside their house. The detective's examination of Hoffman's journals revealed disturbing fantasies about becoming part of the Henderson family. He had written detailed scenarios in which he imagined replacing Mark Henderson as the family's father and husband, describing elaborate plans for integrating himself into their daily lives and routines. Morgan found evidence that Hoffman had been sabotaging the Henderson family's property and possessions to create opportunities to offer assistance. He had punctured their car tires, damaged their sprinkler system, and caused minor electrical problems that prompted them to ask for his help with repairs. The investigation uncovered that Hoffman had been impersonating Mark Henderson online, creating fake social media accounts and baiting profiles using his photographs and personal information. He had been conducting online relationships with women while pretending to be his neighbor, possibly as practice for assuming his identity. Detective Morgan discovered that Hoffman had purchased identical clothing to items worn by Henderson family members, apparently attempting to dress like them or possibly planning to impersonate them. His closet contained exact duplicates of Mark Henderson's work clothes and Sarah Henderson's casual outfits. The detective found evidence that Hoffman had been researching methods for administering sedatives and tranquilizers, possibly planning to drug the family members to make them more compliant during a planned abduction. His computer browser history showed extensive research into chemical compounds and dosage calculations. Morgan learned that Hoffman had been calling the Henderson Children's School and doctor's offices, impersonating Mark Henderson to gather information about their schedules and health records. He had obtained Emma's class schedule and Lucas's medical files through these deceptive phone calls. The investigation revealed that Hoffman had been following Sarah Henderson to work and other locations, photographing her interactions with colleagues and friends. His surveillance extended beyond their home to encompass their entire social network and daily routines throughout the community. Detective Morgan discovered that Hoffman had been intercepting and reading the Henderson family's text messages through spyware he had installed on their cell phones during previous break-ins. He had complete access to their private communications and had been monitoring their conversations for over a year. The detective found evidence that Hoffman had been planning to kidnap the Henderson children, having researched soundproofing materials for his basement and purchased restraints and sedatives. The attack on August 23rd appeared to be a deviation from his original plan, possibly triggered by fear of discovery. The investigation took a shocking turn when Detective Morgan discovered that Gerald Hoffman was not the lonely, obsessed neighbor he appeared to be. FBI records revealed that Hoffman was actually Gerald Morrison, a convicted child predator who had been released from federal prison 18 months earlier, after serving 12 years for kidnapping and sexual assault. The most disturbing revelation came when investigators found evidence that Hoffman had been using his surveillance of the Henderson family to facilitate a larger criminal network. His basement contained communication equipment that he had been using to broadcast live video feeds of the children to paying subscribers on the dark web. Further investigation revealed that Hoffman's mother had not died of natural causes in 2018, as previously believed. Forensic examination of her remains showed traces of arsenic poisoning, indicating that Hoffman had murdered her to gain control of the house and establish his base of operations for stalking the Henderson family. Morgan discovered that the Henderson family had not been randomly targeted. FBI analysis showed that Hoffman had been specifically assigned to monitor their neighborhood as part of a larger surveillance operation run by a criminal organization that specialized in identifying families for various illegal purposes. Most shocking discovery came when investigators found evidence that Sarah Henderson had been aware of Hoffman's surveillance activities and had been secretly working with federal authorities to gather evidence against him. Her teaching position was actually a cover identity, and she was an undercover FBI agent investigating child trafficking networks. FBI Special Agent David Torres revealed that the Henderson family had been relocated to Maple Street as part of an ongoing investigation into online child exploitation rings. Sarah's real name was Agent Lisa Chun, and she had been working undercover for 3 years to identify and prosecute members of the criminal network. The investigation uncovered evidence that Mark Henderson was also working with federal authorities, though he was not an agent. He had been recruited as a civilian informant after his insurance investigation work had uncovered suspicious claims related to child trafficking operations. His cooperation with the FBI had placed his family at risk. Detective Morgan learned that Hoffman's attack on the Henderson family had been ordered by the criminal organization he worked for, who had discovered that Sarah was an undercover federal agent. The assault was intended to eliminate the threat she posed to their operations and send a message to other law enforcement infiltrators. The most disturbing revelation was that Emma and Lucas Henderson were not the biological children of Mark and Sarah. They were victims who had been rescued from previous trafficking operations and placed with the undercover agents as part of their cover story. The children had no knowledge of their true backgrounds. Further investigation revealed that Hoffman's surveillance equipment had been provided by the criminal organization and was far more sophisticated than initially believed. The network had been using his monitoring of the Henderson family to test their security systems and gather intelligence on FBI investigative techniques. Detective Morgan discovered that several other families in the neighborhood had been under similar surveillance by different operatives working for the same criminal organization. The entire Maple Street area had been chosen as a testing ground for surveillance and infiltration techniques. The investigation revealed that Hoffman's journals contained detailed information about dozens of other families across multiple states, suggesting that the surveillance network was much larger than initially suspected. Federal authorities launched a nationwide investigation based on the intelligence found in his basement. The final shocking revelation came when investigators discovered that the criminal organization had been planning to kidnap Emma and Lucas Henderson the same day that Hoffman attacked the family. His deviation from the plan had inadvertently prevented a more serious crime while exposing the entire operation. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Ohio filed federal charges against Gerald Hoffman on September 15, 2024, including first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, production and distribution of child pornography, and violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The murder charge carried a potential death sentence. Hoffman was indicted along with 14 other members of the criminal organization, identified through his surveillance equipment and communication records. The federal grand jury issued charges related to child trafficking, online exploitation, and conspiracy to commit violent crimes against federal agents. The case attracted national attention when prosecutors revealed that the Henderson family had been undercover federal agents and that the Maple Street neighborhood had been the site of an extensive law enforcement operation. Media coverage focused on the sophisticated nature of the criminal surveillance network. Hoffman hired prominent criminal defense attorney Michael Stevens, who attempted to argue that his client suffered from severe mental illness and had been manipulated by the criminal organization. However, the extensive evidence of premeditation and the organized nature of his surveillance activities undermined the insanity defense. The trial began on February 10, 2025, with extensive security measures due to threats against prosecution witnesses and the high-profile nature of the case. FBI agent Torres testified about the undercover operation and the sophisticated surveillance network that had been targeting law enforcement families. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh presented evidence of Hoffman's systematic stalking of the Henderson family and his role in the larger criminal conspiracy. The jury viewed hours of surveillance footage that Hoffman had recorded, demonstrating the invasive nature of his monitoring and the danger he posed to the family. Emma and Lucas Henderson, whose real identities remained protected, provided testimony about the attack and their experiences living under Hoffman's surveillance. Their courage in testifying helped establish the psychological impact of his crimes and the threat he posed to child victims. Expert witnesses testified about the sophisticated technology used in the surveillance operation and the methods employed by the criminal organization to identify and target law enforcement families. The testimony revealed the nationwide scope of the conspiracy and the resources dedicated to compromising federal investigations. Mark Henderson testified about discovering his wife's true identity as an FBI agent and his decision to cooperate with federal authorities despite the risks to his family. His testimony provided crucial details about how the criminal organization had been identified and the evidence gathered during the Allard undercover operation. The defense's strategy focused on portraying Hoffman as a mentally ill individual who had been exploited by more sophisticated criminals. However, the evidence of his leadership role in the surveillance operation and his history of violent crimes undermined attempts to minimize his culpability. The trial's most dramatic moment came when prosecutors played recordings of Hoffman discussing plans to kidnap and harm the Henderson children. The recordings, captured through FBI surveillance of the criminal organization, demonstrated his active participation in planning violent crimes. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. The evidence of premeditated murder, conspiracy, and child exploitation was overwhelming, and jurors clearly understood the serious threat Hoffman posed to public safety. Judge Patricia Anderson sentenced Hoffman to death for the murder of Agent Sarah Henderson and multiple life sentences for the conspiracy and child exploitation charges. The sentence reflected the severity of his crimes and the ongoing threat he posed to law enforcement and innocent families. The Hoffman case fundamentally changed how federal law enforcement agencies protect undercover agents and their families during long-term operations. The investigation led to enhanced security protocols for agents working in residential cover, assignments, and improved screening procedures for neighborhoods used in undercover operations. Gerald Hoffman was transferred to federal death row at USP Terre Haute, where he awaits execution while his appeals proceed through the federal court system. His conviction effectively dismantled a nationwide child trafficking and surveillance network that had been operating for over 5 years. The criminal organization's 14 other members received sentences ranging from 25 years to life in prison. Federal authorities recovered over $3 million in assets and identified 47 child victims who were placed in protective custody and provided with rehabilitation services. Agent Sarah Henderson was posthumously awarded the FBI Director's Medal for Exceptional Service, and the Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service. Her undercover work led to the prosecution of dozens of criminals and the rescue of numerous child trafficking victims. Mark Henderson and the children were relocated under new identities and continued to receive federal protection and support. Services. The family has established a foundation to support law enforcement families affected by violent crimes and to fund research into protecting undercover agents. The case prompted congressional hearings on the security of undercover law enforcement operations and led to increased funding for protecting agents and their families. New legislation provided enhanced penalties for crimes against federal agents and their family members. The investigation revealed that similar surveillance networks were operating in dozens of other communities across the United States, leading to a nationwide task force dedicated to identifying and prosecuting these criminal organizations. The Hoffman case became a model for investigating complex surveillance conspiracies. Federal authorities used intelligence from the case to launch Operation Safe Neighborhood, a nationwide initiative to identify and disrupt criminal surveillance networks targeting law enforcement families. The operation has led to hundreds of additional arrests and the rescue of numerous victims. The case serves as a stark reminder of the dangers faced by law enforcement officers and their families, particularly those working undercover operations. Sarah Henderson's sacrifice helped protect countless other potential victims and exposed a significant threat to national security. Questions remain about how many other neighborhoods may be under surveillance by criminal organizations and whether adequate protections exist for law enforcement families living in undercover assignments. The Hoffman case continues to influence discussions about balancing effective law enforcement with officer safety and family protection.